to this February 5th meeting of the Somerville School Committee. Pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2023, this meeting of the school committee will be conducted via hybrid participation. We will post an audio recording, audio-video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of these proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting on the City of Somerville website and local cable access government channels. Will you call the roll, Dr. Carmona? Yep.
Good evening, everyone. I am calling we have the roll call here. Ms. Barish.
Present.
Mayor Ballantyne. President Owen Campen.
Here.
Mr. Green.
Here.
Mr. Bitton.
Here.
Ms. Bitton.
Present.
Dr. Ackman. Dr. Phillips.
Here.
Ms. Krebschen.
Here.
We have quorum.
We will start with a moment of silence and a salute to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic from which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We will now introduce our interpreters. Spanish, will you please unmute yourself and introduce yourself?
Good evening, everyone. This is your Spanish interpreter, Tracy Pichardo. Buenas noches todos. Este es el intérprete de español, Tracy Pichardo, simultáneamente. Gracias. Thank you.
And Haitian Creole, please introduce yourself. Haitian Creole, please introduce yourself.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Angie Supri. I'll be the Haitian Creole interpreter for tonight. Bonsoir tout le monde. Nom c'est Angie Supri. Je vais traduire pour nous asseoir.
And Portuguese? No. Okay. That brings us to our report of our student representatives who are joining us via Zoom.
Hi, my name is Katarina Dinka, and I'm one of the school representatives.
Hold on just a moment. Is there a way we can turn the volume up? Can you try again, Kat?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. We just wanted to share that we're holding office hours now as student reps, and we have launched student rep office hours to hear from more representative groups of students about their concerns and ideas for the school in order to create and foster a more enjoyable and safe space for everybody. We also had a successful Valentine's Day dance, which took place on January 26th. And our class cup updates and class Olympics are as follows. We're continuing them until February 16th, and everything is going well so far. The classes are all earning points. We're all in the 1,400 range. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Emily Portillo, and I'm going to be adding on to what Katarina Dinka said. I just want to make sure, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Thanks.
Okay, so something that's also going on is course selection for grades 9 through 11th, and there were also parent-teacher conferences last week. And then for Black History Month, the SHS Black Student Union will be hosting some events like a movie night and a panel on Black experiences in education.
Great, thank you so much. I'm excited to hear about your office hours. That sounds like a great idea. Are there any, Mr. Green?
So we happen to have a decent number of students with us today. Do you mind telling us when those office hours are?
We haven't picked a time yet, but I'm pretty sure that we're going to be doing them during our X block, which takes place on Tuesdays. And if I'm not mistaken, they usually go from 10 to 11. So we'll be meeting in the library and waiting for students to come in and share any concerns or voice their opinions on things that are going on in the school. We're hoping to have it that block, but we're also accessible to meeting with students before school and as well as after school. And that's what we have planned so far.
Thank you.
Great. Are there any other questions or comments for our student reps? Seeing none, thank you for joining us this evening. That brings us to approval of minutes. I will entertain a motion.
I move to approve the minutes from November 6th, 2023, November 20th, 2023, and December 4th, 2023.
I have a motion by Ms. Barish, seconded by Dr. Phillips. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. That brings us to public comment, and before we start, I'm just going to read a brief statement. I would like to take a moment to thank our students for coming out tonight. We appreciate your passion and always want to hear from students. We also take free speech seriously and want to make sure you have an opportunity to speak within the bounds of what is under the purview of the school committee. We are here to listen to what you have to say. Before I read our official policy, I just want to once again clarify why I cut off a public commenter back in November. I made a split-second decision because I believe the topic was not under the purview of the school committee. In retrospect, I should have given a warning and not immediately cut off the mic. Global conflicts are not the purview of the school committee. The role of the school committee is very specific: the SPS budget, policy, hiring and firing of the superintendent, and labor negotiations. As far as the recent resolution taken up by our city council, school committee practice is to defer to them on resolutions outside of our purview, in the same way city council would never make a resolution on things within our purview. I would also like to remind everyone that in accordance with open meeting law, we only deliberate on what is on our agenda, posted at least 48 hours in advance, and that our policy is to have 2 readings before we vote on anything that we want to get community feedback on. I will be asking the superintendent for a report at our next meeting about how we prepare and protect students and teachers when discussing current events and difficult topics. And then Dr. Carmona would also like to say a few words before I read our official policy.
Thank you, Chair. So I really want to echo the words from the Chair. I think we're proud of our democratic tradition in Salem of supporting student voices, and we take that seriously. I also want to express my unequivocal condemnation of the senseless violence and killing of the innocent. The ongoing violence in Israel and Gaza has been disheartening and deeply painful to witness. While words cannot undo the loss of life or fully address the profound trauma caused by these events, as a district, we are committed to fostering an atmosphere of inclusivity and compassion. We wholeheartedly condemn anti-Palestinian, anti-Semitic, anti-Arab, Islamophobic, and xenophobic rhetoric attacks. As public educators, as a school district committed to celebrating the humanity of all people, it is our responsibility to care for all our students, ensuring that they are seen and heard, particularly during difficult times. Every student should feel they have a trusted adult to turn when upset or seeking answers about the complexities of the world around them. Our Office of Curriculum, in collaboration with high school leadership and district educators, has provided relevant resources to support educators, social workers, and other staff in cultivating students' empathy and collective responsibility towards these current events with the utmost respect and sensitivity. Finally, I want to acknowledge the complexities involved in the violence in Israel and Gaza, intertwined with deeply personal characteristics such as identity, race, religion, and nationality. Recognizing the critical importance of these issues, I acknowledge the historical, institutional, and systemic dynamics at play, while rejecting the barbaric acts of violence towards innocent civilians. In a diverse and engaged community like Somerville Public Schools, I recognize that people may hold varying perspectives on the situation in Gaza and Israel. However, please be assured that our commitment as Somerville Public Schools remain unwavering. We stand together to celebrate the humanity of all our students, their families, and fellow citizens, and we are dedicated to caring for every student, ensuring they are seen and heard, especially during challenging times.
All right, with that, I'm going to read our official policy on public comment, and then I will call on public commenters in the order in which they signed up. Welcome and thank you to those who have signed up for public comment. Speakers will be allowed 3 minutes to present their material. However, the chair may limit comments to 2 minutes based on the number of individuals signed up to speak. Based on the number of signed up, speakers may have 3 minutes. Speakers should begin their comments by stating their name and address, or in the case of district employees, their role within the district. The chair of the meeting, after a warning, reserves the right to terminate speech which is not constitutionally protected because it constitutes true threats that are likely to provoke a violent reaction and cause a breach of the peace or incitement to imminent lawless conduct, or which contains obscenities. Public comment is not a discussion, debate, or dialogue between the public and the committee. Members of the committee will not reply to public comment in the course of the meeting, though individual members may follow up, and items from public comment may be taken in future meetings. The school committee will not hear personal complaints of school personnel, nor against any member of the school community in public session. Individuals may address topics on the agenda or items within the school committee's scope of responsibility, such as the district budget, goals and policies, or role of the superintendent. The public is encouraged to submit comments in writing for inclusion in the public record. So first I have Jackie Carrington, followed by Linda Barris-Matova. Jackie, the floor is yours.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I am a mom at the Brown School. I have a first grader and a fourth grader there. I am here tonight to listen to what will be presented, and am looking forward to a plan for smoothing the transition for our fifth graders. So it is not a big question every year of where there will be spots for them. We have brought this issue to your attention many times before, and this fits into the framework of this larger question of access to schools on the west side of town. And yeah, I'm just really curious to hear what you all have to say tonight, and thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have Linda Barros, followed by Olive. Linda? Okay. So next I have Olive, followed by Layla. Olive, the floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming out today. We are here today on behalf of the SHS Students for Palestine group, requesting a ceasefire resolution and a strong statement on behalf of the Somerville Public Schools standing in solidarity with Palestine. We will now pass around a letter at this time, as well as a similar resolution that was passed in Ann Arbor, Michigan by their school district that demonstrates to their student population that their lives are seen and cared for. For the past month, we've all consumed copious amounts of media portraying the devastating genocide unfolding in Gaza. As an aspiring journalist myself, as well as a writer for our school's newspaper, the Highlander News, I have tried my best to relay to students the information of these unfolding events, something the school curriculum has failed to do. As student demonstrators held a student-led walkout, teachers and staff engaged in a meeting in which they were told the discussion around this topic was not appropriate for high school students. While a few history teachers paused their regular program curriculum to talk about the climbing death tolls and health crisis in Gaza, the extent of education on this pressing current events topic was minuscule. In a place in which we come to learn and grow into young adults, this pivotal moment in history is being overlooked. As a student at SHS, I cannot stress enough the importance of integrating current events issues into our daily curriculum. Learning about topics of importance to better our worldly understanding is pivotal in the education of us as young people. We are the next generation of Americans, and we cannot be sheltered from the realities of our world, as well as the impact that our centralized country has in international and empirical affairs. As one of the wealthiest and most powerful countries in the world, it is absolutely essential that we are given a foolproof understanding of the devastations in Gaza, as it will shape our future. It is the school's sole responsibility to educate and nurture us as students, and to overlook this genocide that is not only personal to many students here at SHS, but also betters the understanding for those who are personally affected of the unavoidable realities of this genocide. Many times in history, people have remained passive as events unfold outside our borders, claiming that as they are not personally affected, it is not their responsibility to be an upstander. This issue is personal to students, as 146 SHS students in the past 2 days have signed our letter to you. That is why we are calling on you, our educators, to be moral leaders to the youth of this city and speak up. Being silent is choosing to remain complicit in the horrors that are unfolding. Thank you.
Next, I have Layla, and then I believe it says Sarah, but correct me if I'm misreading. Layla?
Good evening. I'm here to request that you declare a ceasefire resolution. You probably ask yourself, why as the school committee would it be important to sign a ceasefire resolution that is happening thousands of miles away? Well, the answer is that everything happening right now in Palestine is linked to our academic curriculum such as world history, politics, religion, ethics, etc. This matters because the U.S. government is funding this genocide. We, as the city of Somerville, could lead by example and inspire other cities to model our resolution. We could be the second school district in the United States to do this. My name is Layla Eden Abarkagresh, and my parents gave me the name Layla because it means the same thing in both Hebrew and Arabic, the night. I'm a descendant of Mexican Sephardic Jews who spoke Hebrew and Ladino, a Judeo-Spanish. My parents lived in Cairo and fell in love with the culture and language. It was important for them to fuse my dad's Jewish roots with the Arabic language. My sister's name is Salma, which means safety in Hebrew and Arabic, and my brother's name is Liam, which means my people in Hebrew. Living in France, I had a nanny that spoke to me in Arabic. I was fluent. This necklace has been hanging around my neck every day for the past 5 years. It's the 8th letter of the Hebrew alphabet called a Hai. Everyone in my family has one. It's a symbol of long life. In the past 120 days, all I've seen is the loss of life. Children in Gaza are not being granted this Jewish ideal that we hold so close to our hearts. In the first 2 weeks of this genocide, many more children in Gaza have died than attend our school. For a month, I couldn't open Instagram because all I could see were scarring images that adults in power are not talking about. Children shouldn't be dying at the expense of politics. Eventually, I got desensitized to this. I can watch gruesome, gut-wrenching videos without batting an eye. Is this what we want for future generations, to be so accustomed to this brutal and massive destruction of something as precious as life? I recently learned a new term after watching a movie called Israelism, Tikkun Olam. Tikkun Olam is a Jewish concept that means world repair, but has been heavily associated with social action and justice movements. I don't see very much of this term being applied in a time where it's most desperately needed. We look back on genocides in the past and think, how could we have let this happen? We're currently living history that will be taught in school years ahead. If we don't act soon, people will repeat. How could we allow this to happen? We are required to take 4 years of history in school. What's the point of history? History is to educate us on the past, to form a better future. We must learn from past mistakes and apply them to the world we live in today. We are witnessing rising tensions on a global and local scale. For example, the Wall Street Journal, one of the most powerful and influential economic powerhouses, recently referred to Dearborn, Michigan as a jihad capital due to its large Arab and Palestinian population. Newspapers should not be getting away with seeing things in such black and white terms by calling Arab Americans terrorists. We must have a mutual respect for each other. On a local scale, our whole community saw Mr. Halawa, a Palestinian American teacher at Somerville High, silenced when bringing up this specific subject to this same group. We need a clear call for peace and justice from the leaders of our school. We see it on social media every day, but don't hear anything in school. Somerville High students say ceasefire now. Thank you.
Next, I have Sarah and then Shadi.
Hi everyone, my name is Sarah Kaparia, a fairly new resident of Somerville and a student of Somerville High School. I'm the founder and leader of Muslim Students Association at Somerville High School. I felt the need of making one because at some point I felt so left out and alone. Hearing about Palestinian children dying every day broke my heart. And I spent nights sitting alone and just doing nothing, sometimes so blank and sometimes thinking I could be the next victim. After the 3 students shot in Vermont, our neighboring state, at some point I left all hopes. My parents were so scared and stopped me from wearing a keffiyeh to school, stopped me from going to the protests I was leading, and stopped me from organizing for the Muslim Students Association because they were scared. At this point, this hijab felt like burden on my head. At some point, I was one step away from ripping it off. The pride of this hijab was supposed to be for me. This hijab was supposed to be a pride for me, but it became shameful. Sometimes I didn't need anyone's words to say something. The stares and glares were enough. The only thing that was keeping me going was the past I remember. The stories of my uncle, which he used to tell me of his social work he did. He was the reason I got into speaking for what I want. When I was 9 years old, he came back from Syria and told me he saw a girl just like me, just as my age, just as cute as me. The only difference was that she has parents and I did not. She didn't have parents and I did. She didn't have a home and I did. She didn't have food on her plate and I did. I still sit alone and wonder if she's still alive. My soul sister, the one I feel a connection with while she doesn't even know me, and I don't even know if she still exists. I'm fighting for her, fighting for more girls like her who never got to live, never got to study. And I can't go back to the past and change it, but I can still save others like her in the future. And sadly, sitting here, I can do nothing. Even my own parents are not with me in this fight. Recently, after coming to America, I spoke in many protests, a big one right in front of Boston City Hall, and every time I lied to my parents about where I'm going. It doesn't matter to me much these days about lying, but today, when I lied to come here, I called my dad and I told him I have this school committee meeting and I want to attend it for some betterment of school, and suddenly all these emotions came flooding to me. And I collapsed. My eyes started tearing up in the middle of the road in front of many people from our school. I was embarrassed, but I put my hood on my head and I was hiding all I was going through. After doing all this, I can't tell my parents and make them proud because they don't want me to do the organizing and speaking for Muslims and Palestinians, because they are scared I will be shot in the back next. They are scared someone will kill me or bully me, and because of this pressure, I lie to my family every day to go to a protest. Anyways, let's talk about how school supported me in what I'm doing. I told the school that I want to organize a teach an event about what is happening in Palestine and Israel. And I clearly mentioned that it will be a teach-in and won't be biased. And this school said this idea is crazy. If you want to do something, do it after school and keep it optional for students. I was like, why? Why can't we do for every single person? Why do the students not need to know the history and current affairs, or are they kept away from it purposely? And yeah, instead of this, the school organized a meet and calling it Middle Eastern Crisis. It was one day meet after school, which was kept really low-key and not even many people knew about it. Only 4 people showed up and they were all from my organization. And I wanted to speak there, but in fact, they just gave me a piece of paper and said, write your thoughts on it. I wasn't even allowed to speak. I want to walk with pride, and I want the children of Palestine to walk with pride with me one day. And hence, we are here to demand not only me, but the other 150 students who already signed the ceasefire resolution. We all demand the justice and freedom for Palestine because it is our freedom too. Let Gaza live. Thank you.
Next is Chadi.
Good evening. My name is Chadi Salamoon. I work upstairs in economic development. I'm here as a private citizen. I'm a former SPS student. I now help Somerville youth transition from Somerville High School as seniors and out into the real world. I came to Somerville at the age of 6 years old, escaping war, experiencing things that no other child or human should have, not by that age or by any age. I was one of the lucky ones. I didn't see my brother's brains splattered all over the walls, my parents' limbs scattered all over the floors. I wasn't orphaned. I got out. And Somerville is my adopted city. It's my home. But homes can sometimes be abusive. In the SPS system and on Somerville streets, I was called a terrorist, a sand N-word. In Somerville's parks, I was physically assaulted. Why? Because I'm Arab. acts of discrimination directed at Arabs and Muslims are not hard for us to come across. Sometimes they're quite open racist statements. Sometimes they're a little bit more subtle. On October 10th, the Somerville Public Schools, 3 days after Hamas's attack on October 7th, put out a letter to the Somerville community, and it brought attention to the horrific attacks, quote unquote, horrific attacks by Hamas on Israel. It was horrific. It also called attention to the fact that in Somerville, hate has no home. Commendable. But what any Arab or Muslim will see when they read this letter is that 3 days after October 7th, October 8th, October 9th, 700 Palestinians were killed by Israel. But this letter did not mention Palestine. This letter did not mention Palestinians. In the 15 years prior to October 7th, 1,400 Palestinian children were killed. We did not get any letter. And even after the ICJ decision to take on the case of genocide against the state of Israel, we still have politicians who cannot stand up and demand for a ceasefire, as if Palestinian lives do not matter. Our children are watching. We have no illusions that the school committee can end this war tonight. We know this. But we do know that every single voice is needed in order to bring a ceasefire and end this nightmare that these children are facing every single day. This nightmare that we cannot wake up as a community. Please use your voice to demand for a ceasefire, as small as you think your voice might be. Thank you so much.
Next, I have 3 public commenters on Zoom. First, I have Elena Ganutanis. Elena, the floor is yours. We'll come back and try Elena. So we'll try Sean Becky.
I don't know if you can hear me now.
We can.
Okay. My name is Sean Becker. I'm a father of 3 children in the Somerville Public Schools, 1 in the high school, 1 at the West Somerville Neighborhood School, and 1 at the Brown School. And my comment or question is directed toward the idea of what the resolution of the Winter Hill Community Innovation School and the Brown School will be. I ask that the school committee and the school administration think about what the ideal school size, as we have varying sized elementary schools in the city, is from first an economic perspective, as I know there are extreme financial issues as we deal with the MSBA and the pursuit of a new school building immediately for the Winter Hill Community School, and in the future, potentially for the Brown School. My next ask would be that you come up with an idea of what is your ideal elementary school size for the city. Obviously, this is not going to impact my children much, as they'll be moved on by the time any of this is dealt with. But I think that Somerville's tradition of having distributed community neighborhood schools of smaller scale has led to great outcomes. And I hope to see that continue. But I know that that's an economic question as much as it is a question of instruction. But it would be great to see the city identify their goals in this to educate the parents who will be affected by this. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Ruben Contini Field.
Okay, can you say your name?
Hello.
Oh, hi, Eily. Sorry, it got written down wrong. The floor is yours.
I am Ruben Contini Field. I'm in 4th grade, 8 at the Winter Hill at Edgerley, and I had something to say about the bathrooms at the Edgerley. The second floor boys' bathroom at the Edgerley has never been like it hasn't been working for a week or more. It's like alternating between broken and not broken, and like you never really know whether it's going to be broken or not. I just want it to be not broken.
Thank you, Ruben. So I'll go back and try Elena.
Yes, can you hear me?
We can, thank you.
Okay, great. Sorry, I was speaking before and couldn't be heard. Yes, my name is Elena Ganatakis, and I live on Powderhouse Boulevard in Somerville. And my public comment is related to the Brown School 5th grade transition to 6th grade. Just want to express concern on behalf of the parents that we haven't received transparent information on the class size limits. And we were also promised that we would have a meeting with the superintendent to discuss our concerns, and that has not materialized. In particular, we're just concerned about some of the transportation issues for families that are displaced out of their neighborhood schools across to East Somerville. How will we get our kids to school on time when kids have to be dropped off at the Brown School? And then what can be a 25-minute commute in morning traffic to get our kids across town? We're also wondering what kinds of support the school system will provide for these children that will be separated from their peers with potentially none of their cohort or very few of their cohort as they try to integrate into other schools. My daughter had actually prepared some comments about how she's feeling about this, but she was actually reluctant to speak because she was afraid that she would get retaliated against and have less of a chance of getting into a neighborhood school, which I thought was kind of sad. And so we would just like the chance to have someone talk with us and actually give us some answers and have transparency. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes public comment. Brings us to our next item of business, which is the report of the superintendent.
Great. Okay. So I am going to start with the Browner School enrollment memo. That is the one that you received from Mrs. Teresa, who is Mrs. Rodriguez, who is responsible for the enrollment numbers. Before I do that, I also just wanted to thank the students who came and shared their voices. We always have said that student voices are critical for the development of our community. So thank you for being here and sharing your thoughts. We'll continue that conversation at some point. So just to shift gears, we share a report with you. There is definitely a challenge that we are facing in terms of our transition for our 5th graders, Benjamin Browner students who need to transition to the other schools, the middle school grades. As you know, during the pandemic, the numbers actually were relatively low. That wasn't an issue at that point. The last number that we had was around 181 during the pandemic years for the overall enrollment. In 2022, we have a class of 19 fifth graders who easily transition into the two schools that are in the west side of the city, which is the Kennedy and the West. In 2023, we had 18 students. It was the same. Most of the students ended up in both schools. A small group of students ended up at the Argenciano. And this year we have 29 students, so it's a significant increase. And those 29 students are going to, most of them are going to split between the West and the Kennedy. And there will be 6 students who will have to be going into the either Argenciano or the Healy or the Winter Hill School. So one of the challenges that we have is, and that's why I brought up this conversation to you, because the process has been consistent as far as I know. Again, it has been somewhat dormant for a couple of years because of the enrollment issues. But when in checking with prior administrations, what I heard was they either had a bubble class or they either figured out how to distribute the kids. So there was no consistency in that approach as far as I know. A couple of questions that have come through the families as to the numbers, enrollment numbers, as well as bubble classes. The enrollment numbers, not the enrollment numbers, I mean increasing the enrollment numbers in both the Kennedy as well as the West School. So right now we're counting, most of the schools actually, there are only 3 or 4 schools in the entire district that have 24 students. The rest of them are between 18 students to 22 students. So given the fact that we are coming from the pandemic years, learning loss, especially challenges, social emotional challenges in the middle school grades, we are keeping those numbers no more than 23. That's the number, the number that is in the contract is around 26, but just to be consistent across the district. Creating a bubble class at this juncture is also not a feasible option, and that is what brings the question to you as a team right now is, right now, again, there is a challenge, but we will figure out a way to address most of the students, as I said earlier. There will be 6 students or 5 to 6 students that will need a placement, either Argenciano, the Argenciano, or the other schools. Moving forward, though, the landscape is a little bit more challenging. We have, in the following years, there will be a couple of years in which there is only, actually, you look at the chart on the wall, we're talking about years in which we have 3 to 4 spaces in the west side of the city, and in some cases you will have 10 or 15. None of those numbers will be able to account for the numbers of the projected students that will be coming from 5th grade into middle school. So what I am bringing this for discussion is because I wanted to hear from you and also share some of the challenges that have been shared by the principal at the Kennedy, Mr. Marshall. Creating a bubble class without other structures around it has been very difficult to support different specials, to integrate students that actually also come from the SIG program and the other programs that they have. They have to have a space for kids to actually integrate during the specials and some other classes. And so the idea of the bubble class is an option and is one that has been a reactive one. But I think that we need to think long-term. Based on those numbers that we have, it looks as if we will have very little capacity in the West to address the transition of our 5th graders from the Benjamin Brown School. So that's my report around that. I don't know if you have any questions or comments.
So I just have a clarifying question. At the bottom, you say adding an additional classroom to the Kennedy or West, a so-called bubble classroom. Currently, there's no physical space at the West. Does that mean technically there's physical space at the Kennedy, but there's reasons that you're hesitating to do it, or there isn't physical space at either? They provide some services in an extra room that they have that could, in
potentiality be created for a bubble class, but that's just the least of the challenges that they have. So it is not only that, but it's also the structure that they have in that grade level.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify since you say.
And yes, and the West has no space as far as I know.
Okay, other questions? Dr. Ackman?
This is a genuine curiosity. I know when the high school was under construction, we had those trailers that, you know, I remember many students saying we're better than the old high school in certain parts. So I don't know if any of our properties, if we have to bubble, is there a possibility of trailers for space? Has that been looked into?
So this is the first time we started this inquiry, and that's why I came to you, because it is also, I think, is a transition that has been somewhat haphazard. Again, it was dormant over 3 or 4 years because of the pandemic numbers, and now it is here in front of us, and it will be here with us for at least 3 or 4 years. So I don't know. That's a good question. That is a question that has to be addressed in conjunction with both the West and the Kennedy School.
Mr. Vitone, then Mr. Green, and then Ms. Parrish. Mr. Vitone?
Thank you, Chair Krepshin. Through you, Superintendent, how do these numbers that we're seeing in the projected class sizes at Brown and at neighboring schools compared to the enrollment projections that we had from the enrollment study? Are they consistent? Is there, because I thought I recalled from the enrollment study, and forgive me, it's been a while since I looked at it, that we were expecting a decline, and these numbers suggest the opposite.
Yeah, so the language is flat. The enrollment was going to be flat, and then in some grades, like the highest school, there will be an increase, a slight increase. So the interesting thing is that in the west side of the city, we have capacity. If you look at the numbers, there's only 1 year in which we will not have enough capacity for all the incoming Benjamin Brown middle school 5th graders at the west. Actually, regardless, in the entire district, we won't have capacity 1 year. The rest of the years, if you basically piecemeal all the different spaces that will be available, you will be able to do that. But that's what we're trying to resolve here, is the issue that the concentration of that enrollment is happening in the west side of the city. But you're right in terms of the flattening of that trajectory. I haven't compared those numbers with these numbers right now, but those numbers can also change. They can increase or they can decrease. The trends that I'm seeing right now is that as the students, also new students who come from different countries come in, students that are actually in SEI programs, in shelter immersion programs, can also transition into other schools, and those numbers can decrease. But that is a speculation at this point. But
Mr. Green, and then Ms. Parrish.
So, as was mentioned earlier, this isn't a new problem. It's a worsening problem, to be sure, but it's not a new problem. And in prior years, prior superintendents assured us that there were plans for this. So I guess question one, through the chair to Superintendent Carmona, is have you reached out to your predecessors and see if they've had thoughts on this that they haven't shared? And two, as a point of information, can someone remind me when we switched from when Brown became K-5 again, as opposed to K-6? I'm just trying to remember how long ago this started.
Do you remember, Ms. Parrish?
I might be wrong. I would say 6 years ago. Oh no, not 6. Not 6. Sorry, I have a 12th grader, so 7 or 8 years ago.
2016, 27. Okay.
7 or 8 years ago. Yeah.
Thank you. Was there a question there you needed a response to? Oh, Mr. Green had asked about your predecessors and what their thoughts were.
Yeah, I did check with Mary Skipper. I've spoken to Jeff, and so this always, but we didn't anticipate, we didn't talk about it because again, the projections were low at that point, and 188 students, then the year before 18, then the next year 19, 18, and then this year he was gone and we didn't have a conversation about this current cohort. I talked to Mary about it and she said, yeah, we open either a bubble here, a bubble there, but it all depends on who had a space. But I think I worry about a system that relies on such a reactive response. So that's why I'm bringing this up to you.
Ms. Parrish.
Thank you. I, was looking at the numbers that were provided this afternoon, and I think the potential variation in openings at the Healy School just add another layer of complexity to sort of the calculations. If it could be 11 or it could be 25, that's a huge gap. So I'm just reflecting on, that additional challenge in the planning of this. As far as bubble classes go, I think, at some point in the history of this transition process, 1 year most of the students would go to the West, and then the next year most of the students would go to the Kennedy. That was when there were just 7th and 8th graders that had to be accommodated. So I was sort of in my head thinking about, well, could we just add a third school to that? And every year it was just, but it just seems like it's too many students to accommodate in that way. To have 38 students, for example, or 44 students, as we're seeing further down the road. So I'm just reflecting. I apologize. I don't have anything brilliant to share, I don't think, yet. But I'm glad that we're having the conversation because, as Mr. Green, I think, said, it's not a new problem. I was wondering, too, about modular classrooms, pending the building of a new school or multiple new schools, which, as we know, is going to take years. So yeah, I'm like I said, I'm glad we're having the conversation, and I hope that we can come up with something better than the year-to-year process that's been happening. It isn't just stressful for families. It takes an enormous amount of resources, I think, on the district side as well, to come up with a solution that is going to be supportive to families and students and is going to help students be successful. So thanks for bringing it to us, and I hope we can help.
So my question, which you may not know yet, is do we know if all of these 29 students want to go to the West or Kennedy, or if there's interest among some of the students to go to some of these other schools? So in other words, do we know it's going to be a problem that they all want West or Kennedy, or we don't know that yet?
Most of the waiting lists are there's only 2 spots left based on that waiting list, I believe. So the name of the folks that have actually opted for both Kennedy and West has covered the capacity except for 2. I think there's 2 available, or if you do the addition, basically, you still have 2 spots available, which most likely will end up in the West. So the demand is there. I know that families have, spoken to me about the need to, they want that preference. I know that, the neighborhood feeling and being in the community is one of the things that I've heard constantly across the board. So my guess is that, yes, most of those spots will be, usually, traditionally, there have been 1 or 2 students who have left to a different district. If even that's the case, we're talking about 4 students still that will need to be accommodated.
Are there other questions? Yeah, Dr. Phillips and then Ms. Patton.
Sorry, this is a blinding flash of the obvious, right? But by the end of this school year, right, the school building committee should be deciding what they're taking to a feasibility study. So we'll know kind of the long-term 5 to 7 year plan, like, is this going to be solved by the creation of a joint Winter Hill Brown, or is it not? So are we looking for a medium-term solution for the next 5 to 7 years, 7 to 9 years, however long it takes to build that building, or are we looking for a longer-term solution till we, resolve the Brown problems if we choose a Winter Hill only model? So I would imagine that we're going to wait for that to happen, and we're going to explore a bunch of other options. But I think the right answer varies significantly depending on the long-term plans for our buildings.
And I don't think that the work that is happening or that will be happening to address the Winter Hill needs, even if we say Winter Hill and Brown, we still have to have 5 to 7 years to address a systematic issue. So that requires, which is also not budgeted, and so this is an extra cost that has to be accounted for. And again, in conversation with Mr. Marshall, we have to really think carefully about, it's not just putting emptying a classroom and filling it in. It's more complicated than that. And I think that again will be a reactive measure, just to empty a room and then and so it might solve a critical need, but it's also doesn't create a feeling of like a systematic response to the need.
Ms. Bitone, and then Mr. Bitone, and then Mr. Green.
Thank you. Through your chair, Krupchen, I wanted to thank the superintendent for making this effort to try to forecast, because it's always been a tricky year-to-year challenge in terms of placement of students. And as you reflected from what you learned, every year it got handled a little bit differently, and I do have always found that the bubble was never the best solution. And you'd have, just so anybody who doesn't know what we're talking about, you'd have 3 7th grade classrooms, but only 2 8th grade classrooms, which causes a lot of logistical challenges, and it actually ends up affecting educators because they have to change jobs, and it's really problematic. And as colleague Barish mentioned, the work that the administration has to do, the stress that this causes families. So I look forward to hearing from administration what some of the ideas are, whether it's modules or 3 thinking. But I do understand that our schools are packed to the gills, and we also have a fiscal responsibility that all our classrooms are as best utilized as possible. So that's another trick of, like, when you add another teacher in one school, then in another school you may have classrooms that have smaller class sizes, and so that's a financial responsibility. One thing, and I don't know, I don't want to get into the weeds, and if it's not really that important, I understand this, but I'm curious about proximity. So how many of the families that we predict are from the proximity of the West or the schools around there versus proximity of the center of the city or the east side of the city? Because if we're having this demand that from families that are primarily living on the west side of the city, it seems to be more palpable and more of a challenge, even though at that age some kids can travel, and that's not unusual, but not all kids. So anyway, so that's something that I would be curious about. I'm sure you're going to be looking into that in terms of how many families are from the west side of the city school proximity versus ones from the mid. Not to minimize the fact that communities do get severed in this process, and that's really particularly hard on certain kids, and other kids are maybe more flexible. So anyway, I think I've spoken up and shared my thoughts, but I look forward to any solution that doesn't involve parents stressed, kids stressed, and administration and teachers having to do a lot of additional work when it's not systematized.
Mr. Bitone, and then Mr. Green.
Thank you, through you, Chair. I want to pick up on a point that Dr. Phillips raised or touched upon, that we are in the process of envisioning a number of plans. We have the K through 8 plan. We're engaging in a school building project. And we've also touched upon this notion of exploring what the community feels about Central Middle School option, something that's kind of in the ether right now. So I do agree that this problem is a now problem, and it's a next several years problem, probably decade. And I agree that we need to come up with a solution, and I'm glad that you brought it to us. I also just want to recognize that the challenge that we're faced with here, I say we, it's really a challenge that is not equitably distributed amongst our community, right? This is a challenge for those families mainly at the Brown School who, by virtue of living where they live, have a community school that cannot accommodate grades 6, 7, and 8. And so I think in order to address that situation, that inequity, we really do need to be thoughtful about how, because families there are faced with this conundrum in entering 6th grade in a way that no other families across the district are faced. So I guess just wanting to keep that in mind, and thank you for bringing it to us. And I do think this is a matter that there should be a policy for. We should come up with a system. So I really appreciate the work that's gone into this, and I hope we can continue that.
Mr. Green.
I think my comment kind of builds off of Mr. Baton's, which is that, remember, for our perspective, there's, I want to be clear to what the problem is. Let me go back to that. I think there is a problem that for students for whom the Brown is their neighborhood school, and the next two nearest schools are then the Weston and Kennedy. If they can't get into those schools, there's a transportation problem. I am less convinced the problem is that cohorts of students can't travel together. If that's that feels to me to be a different problem that may not be as pressing. And I want us to, if we think that Brown students have a right to travel as a cohort, then yes, we should state that explicitly. We've never done that. And so I want us to think deeply as to what is actually the problem we're trying to solve as we go through this process. Because it may be that the right solution is to have students piecemeal with a preference given to students for whom there is no, to students for whom the nearest schools for them are the Weston and the Kennedy.
Through the chair. Yes, I don't know what year was it in which they pull together as a cohort. I think it was 2022 or 2023, in which 4 families actually chose to go to the Argenciano, and they traveled together. That is an interesting question. What are we trying to solve? Is that right? So there are a couple of things. One is, my understanding is in Somerville there is the emotional commitment to the community neighborhood, the neighborhood school. So that's what I have heard before. That's what I heard with the Winter Hill community. I heard with the Brown community as well. I always think about the portfolio of the schools that we offer. The Argenciano is a wonderful school. It offers a great community choice for the communities that are around there. I think the Healy also is, it's got some significant strengths. The Winter Hill has moved down to another part of the city, so that is actually adding another extra challenge. But they also have capacity. That is a good question. My understanding, though, is that families want to have the proximity that they have within that.
Mr. Green?
Yeah, I just want to make sure we're not question begging as we go starting a solution, skipping the steps of actually firmly identifying what the problem is. Because I've heard us all say the crisis, the problem. I haven't heard any of us name said problem. And that's been true for several years. Yes, it's difficult to have one school where people transition at a different grade than every other school. But when we're trying to figure out what problem to solve, I would like us to be more explicit and clear as to what that is.
Out of curiosity, I think it might be helpful to understand what percentage of Brown school students is the Brown as their neighborhood school, and what percentage choose that from other neighborhoods of the city. I'm not expecting you to have that answer off the top of your head, but it might help frame our understanding of what the problem we're trying to solve is. Dr. Ackman?
To address that, I mean, if I remember correctly, I can go through it. The last SIP update from Brown, I think we had a map that showed, like, they addressed that. I'm happy to dig through and find it, but like, it's not from this academic year, but it's relatively recent, and I'm happy to dig through our folders and find it and share it if that will help inform. But just to your point, like, I think we have relatively recent data on that.
Mr. Vitone and then Dr. Phillips.
Through you, Chair, I have a question about transportation that is would help me better understand what the problem might be. Is there an obligation to provide transportation to students based on a certain distance criteria? Are there criteria that dictate provision of transportation for students unless, you know, if a student is assigned to a school rather than choosing a school, or for instance?
My understanding is that there is, but I will defer to the experts.
I'm no expert in this particular question. I think it's 2-point-something miles. That's kind of the language in the Department of Ed. It is, I don't think it's mandatory, but it's recommended. And so I'll have to double check in the language there.
Dr. Phillips and then Ms. Barish.
This does nothing for Dr. Green or Mr. Green's point about what question are we solving, because I think that is really critical. But one thing that I've been wondering as I just look at the solutions to the mythical problem is we do have these pre-Ks at Kennedy and West. We could shuffle them around and potentially get some more classrooms at those spaces. And that only works if the problem we're trying to solve is that Brown families would prefer to go to the Kennedy and West. That may not be the problem we're trying to solve, but just putting it out there as a possible solution.
Eleanor.
Thank you. Through you, based on some conversations I've had with Brown School parents or parents of current Brown School 5th graders, I think the short-term problem is concern for breaking up the cohort, you know, more than in just 2 schools. So sending 1 student or maybe 2 students to a different school and the impact that that would have. Again, I'm saying based on a few conversations that I've had, I haven't spoken with every parent of a 5th grader at the Brown School. And I think that because historically, the cohort has, for the most part, been kept together, either because the classes have been unusually small in the past few years, or because the district had opted to have a bubble classroom at the Kennedy. That's happened twice in the last 7 or 8 years. And now I've sort of lost my train of thought here. So because the cohort has been kept together traditionally, for the most part, I think that it's very hard to hear that, you know, 7 students will have to go somewhere else. It has happened, you know, in recent years. It's not like it's unprecedented, but I think it's really hard for families to hear that. I do wonder if, and this gets to my point about the resources that this process takes from the district every year, but I wonder if there have been conversations about ensuring that those 7 students will not be isolated. You know, can they all go to one school? Has that conversation happened with families?
In other words, ensuring that it's only 1 or 2 students that end up by themselves off at a different
No, ensuring that it isn't one or two students, that there isn't a student who's isolated, but that like they go as 5 or 6 or, however many students it has to be because of the limitations presented by the number of seats available at the West and the Kennedy.
Did you want to respond to that, Dr. Romano?
So that's a decision that if the families want to, there's space there's 5 or 7 spots at every of the schools aside from those 2 schools have more than 5 spots. So if the question is, can they go? They could go. Is the district able to provide some structures to facilitate that? That's a question that we could discuss. But I emailed all the principals and said, usually in most districts that I've been, there is a transition to middle school. We don't because it's K through 8, is that right? So, but the conversation about the transition to the middle school grades is one that usually happens systematically, like principals from the middle school come in and talk to their 5th graders, and so it's more systematic, kids get more a sense of like they already belong by the time they're moving. We don't have that because is a system that is already, we have a K through 5 and a K through 8 ecosystem. So that is part of the challenge. And so that's a question that we can approach if families decide that they want to do that as a cohort. That is a question that definitely, can be entertained.
Mr. Green?
So, to build on Ms. Barris's comment, if it is the case that the concern is that families have a preference for schools, independent of district or distance or whatever, then I feel obligated to name the elephant in the room, which is that over the last 5 to 10 years, we've seen our demographics sorting in, I think, ways that are ultimately negative to the district. And I'd want to know how that preference might reinforce that racial sorting in our schools, because that would be something where we would have to be concerned as a body. So that would be another piece of information to this that I would want before we make a decision on policy.
So it sounds like you're looking for guidance of a policy in the future, not necessarily for this year, because this is an immediate problem that you need to solve as a district. Am I understanding correctly?
That's correct. I think that the options that we have right now are relatively limited. I think that moving forward, I think that, and it's not necessarily a policy that I'm looking for, but I just want to make it known that this is not just a building issue, this is a district issue. So, I can wreck my mind and start thinking about how we solve this from just one side perspective, but I think that this is a district, this is what we do as a body, is like reflect on what are the systematic ways in which we respond to that. And to touch upon many of the questions that have been raised already.
And if memory serves, we've been talking about reviewing our enrollment policy across the district for a while. So maybe this simply ties into, we should think about looking at our enrollment policy more generally. Mr. Green?
I was also looking up the actual busing policy for Mr. Patone, and the rule is 2 miles. And basically, a 2-mile radius from the location of the Brown covers everywhere from West Medford T-Stop to Sullivan Square. So busing is never going to be an obligation for Somerville.
Other questions or comments? Seeing none, may I refer the enrollment policy generally to rules?
Of course.
Excellent. All right, I believe that concludes that, which brings us to your next item.
Yes, and I should have a big apology to Miguel and Darius because they were here, and I should have started with them. They have been here very patiently, so I wanted to introduce the 2 gentlemen here who are coming from BAM and WO, and they have some wonderful reports about impact that they want to share with us. So the floor is yours right now. Yeah.
Good evening. So I'll start before I introduce Darius and Miguel. I am Sean Brown. I am the Executive Director of Youth Guidance Boston, where I oversee both our Becoming a Man and Working on Womanhood program. I've been leading Youth Guidance since 2017 when we launched a program here in Boston. Youth Guidance is a national organization that started in Chicago and then launched BAM in 2017. What I want to start by saying is thank you all and for having us. Truly appreciative of the partnership and support that we have received from the Somerville community. I will say that Youth Guidance is a data-driven organization. We pride ourselves in data. Our study has showed that for BAM on a national level has reduced violence by 50%, increased graduation rates by 20%, and decreased overall crime arrests by 35% for young men in the program. The program also showed for every dollar invested in the program, there's a $30 return by keeping our young people out, the young men out the system. When we look at WOW's data focuses on reducing PTSD, depression, and anxiety in young women. Our data for WOW has shown that 62% of our young queens experience fewer PTSD symptoms when they join the program.
Can I just stop you for a moment
Yes.
and have you say what BAM and WOW stand for?
Absolutely. Thank you for that. So BAM and WOW, BAM is Becoming a Man. Thank you for that. And Youth Guidance, WOW program is Working on Womanhood. We do take for granted that everybody knows what that stands for, so thank you for that. But closing out on WOW's data show that 71% of the queens who join WOW experience fewer depression symptoms when joining. And then when we're talking about student and youth experience, 97% of our queens say that WOW has helped them have healthy relationships with caring adults. Just to start with a little bit of, so I love that we rode the coattails of national data to get here. What I'm really excited about is to talk about our data in Boston. We have our own data to report on. So really excited to report that. During the 22-23 school year, we enrolled 218 scholars in BAM and WOW in Somerville. BAM served 153 scholars and WOW served 65 across 3 Somerville campuses. That is the Haley, Winter Hill, in the high school. Who we serve, 84% of our scholars served by BAM and WOW self-identified as individuals of color. 87% were low income. Looking at the MTSS tiered for Somerville, majority of our scholars fell between in Tier 2 and Tier 3, and that's 79% were classified as requiring either Tier 2 or Tier 3 services. I'm going to pass it to Miguel to share a little bit about programming and what that looked like directly at the schools.
Good evening. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Miguel Torres, and I'm one of 2 program partnership managers that oversee both our programs, Becoming a Man and Working on Womanhood. I am also an adopted son of this city. I've served on the 2 administrations under the city, under Joseph Curtatone and Mayor Ballantyne, so it's a pleasure to be here and continuing to serve our constituents, but more importantly, serve our students and our scholars. And so if I could lead the committee to the second page where it says group services. I just want to really, right there, thank you so much, and really show that throughout last year, 2022 and 2023, we had 21 groups formed, 14 BAM groups and 7 WOW groups, as we only have our WOW program in the high school currently right now. And so out of those 21 groups, we held in total 332 group sessions called BAM and WOW Circles. BAM and WOW Circles are held on a weekly basis, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, out of the 3 campuses that we currently serve. What I also want to show is that the average group attendance rate was 85%, which exceeds Youth Guidance target of 70%. Really speaking to the impact of our program and scholars really wanting to be in our circles and spaces that they actually call their own, that they have created and they have a sense of belonging and being in these spaces. As we move down to individual services, before I pass it over to my program supervisor, Darius, Darius, I want to highlight what is in bold. 97% of our BAM and WOW scholars also receive individual services. So they don't just engage with their counselor or youth specialist in group settings. They also receive one-on-one services and opportunities to connect with their youth specialist and counselor to continue to build that transformative relationship and have that one-on-one time with them as well. And so right now I'll pass it to Darius and I'll be back up.
Hello, what's going on, everybody? My name is Darius. I am a program supervisor here on the north side. Somerville is near and dear to my heart because I implemented the program in 2021, one of the pandemic's kind of running through. So I started at East Boston, and then I came over when Somerville said, and I started the program at Somerville High School, and now I'm back as a program supervisor. Also, I'm a little ashamed to admit, I lived in Somerville, but I had to get up and move to Medford. But I was here at the top of Broadway, right in front of the Healy. So Somerville holds a dear place in my heart. And also, I'm in awe tonight of the young people who are here, who are speaking their voice, and also just everybody's leadership, and even just having that moment and everybody receiving everybody speak. And if there's anything that comes from tonight, I hope my mans gets that bathroom fixed, because boy. Yeah, shout out to him. So yeah, just speaking about more of the stuff that we do with BAM and WOW, we are an in-school program, so we're running our program during the day. Our WOW counselors and BAM youth specialists have 50 to 55 clients on their scholar list. And like Miguel said, they're running groups, 4 to 5 groups a week throughout the week. And when they're not running groups, they're doing individual services, and they're also supporting the school holistically, doing monitoring duties, classroom observations, anything where they can fit in. That's how we find them. But we also do, we are data driven, as my executive director said, so we also do a lot of assessments. We have a pre-assessment and we have a post-assessment. Our BAM and WOW assessments look differently. And I also want to mention that BAM for any scholar that identifies as male, and WOW for any scholar that identifies as female. So either way, wherever you identify, we'll have a place for you. We're inclusive and welcoming. We don't want to push anybody away. So yes, the BAM program will do the Holistic Scholar Assessment, which stands for the HSA, and the WOW program will do a pre-assessment, which focuses on using the CAT scan, the Child and Adolescent Trauma Scan. BAM is a social emotional learning program, and so is WOW, but WOW is a little more clinical. That's why they administer the CAT scan, and BAM does the Holistic Scholar Assessment, which is based on a strength-based assessment. So when we do the Holistic Scholar Assessment looking at BAM, the HSA will survey 14 different categories, and it will go over these different categories. And here in Somerville, the categories that show the most growth are assertiveness, critical thinking, empathy, perseverance, and reflection. And so again, we take the survey at the beginning of the year, and then we go through our curriculum. And both BAM and WOW, we have curriculum that's administered. We have different core values, 6 core values for BAM, 5 core values for WOW. And the hope is that through the engagement through the groups, after we take the pre-assessment, after we go through the curriculum, then at the post-assessment, we gather the data to see where our scholars are at now. And assertiveness, there was a 59% improvement rate. Critical thinking, there was a 59% improvement rate. Empathy, there was a 57% improvement rate. Perseverance, 55%, and reflection, 54%. So baseline data was also collected for 66% of the WOW scholars at Somerville High School, and it suggested that they were experiencing significant mental health challenges during enrollment. 73% of WOW scholars at Somerville High School reported experiencing at least one traumatic event in their lifetime. And 62% of WOW scholars who started in the clinical range for PTSD and had matched pre and post assessments had fewer PTSD symptoms following WOW participation. And by post-test, 64% of WOW scholars who started in the clinical range for depression and who had matched pre and post assessments had lower depression following WOW participation.
They make it easy for me. I tell them all the time, I am because they are. Thank you, gentlemen. Just in diving into looking at generalized and social anxiety, the majority of our WOW scholars at Somerville High with pre-test data were experiencing clinical symptoms of anxiety at enrollment, and 71% of our scholars experiencing clinical generalization at pre-test had lower general anxiety while enrolled in WOW. If we go back and look at I wanted to go back, Darius, to one of the things you talked about when we look at the trauma exposure and post-traumatic stress symptoms. 53% of WOW scholars at Somerville had experienced two traumatic experiences in terms of witnessing violence or experiencing violence. So wanted to share that. And then go into some of the academic data. This is the important piece as we talk about it, so we'll end on academic data, and then I'm going to ask Miguel to close out with a powerful testimony from a parent. When we talk about two things that really, we can talk about this until we're blue in the face, but what's really important is hearing from our young people and what our young people have to say. One of the things I always say that it's important. Student voice is important. It's paramount. They shouldn't only be the beneficiaries of our program, but they should be at the table with us when it's time to make decisions. So when you hear from our young people and the impact, this for me is always the most important piece of the data is what our young people say. So I'm going to hand it to Miguel to talk a little bit about student voice and what our young people are saying.
Thank you. And so that's just a great segue. So we really believe that youth are the experts of their own lives. And so I really just want to ground us first in some youth voice before I move into academic data. We are also an academic program, and we hold academics in high regards. But prior to doing so, just some of the quotes that you may see on the side of the impact report are from scholars or some of the students in the district. And one that I want to highlight is, I wish our moms could have had this back in the day. It is really so helpful. And this is from a Somerville High School WOW scholar. We use terms like scholars, queens, and kings. We are also a rites of passage program, and we usher young folks through rites of passage and really love to show them where they have come from and things of that nature. They're words of endearment and empowerment as well. But now moving into our academic performance. Participants across the district maintained an average daily attendance of 92%. 84% of students improved their school attendance or maintained a high attendance. This is something that I take pride in, as chronic absenteeism or disruption in education can really have negative impacts on students. And so here, reflecting that students love to come to school and be part of the BAM program is super important for me. 100% of participants across BAM and WOW were promoted to the next grade or graduated following the academic school year of 2022-2023. Among scholars whom data was available, 81% of ninth graders were on track. 84% failed no more than one semester course in a course subject. In the end of year survey, 89% of BAM and WOW scholars reported that BAM and WOW helped them find ways to improve their school performance and help them graduate. And as I begin to close, I have a comment, another comment from a BAM scholar. BAM has taught me how to be a better man and how to respect myself and others. I never really gave myself credit for anything and always treated myself badly. I was my worst enemy and hated myself, but after BAM, I learned how to love myself and how to become more focused on my goals. Mr. J, who was actually the youth specialist at Winter Hill, currently at the Edgerly Community Center, taught me how to care for my goals and myself. I will use what BAM has taught me now and in the future. One email that I would love to close with is an email that was sent to this esteemed school committee last year, as we also serve the Healy School. And the reason why I want to bring it up is I noticed that the Healy School had so many openings, and unfortunately it may have a bad rap or a narrative that's not actually true. And the Healy School is a phenomenal school. And from one parent, it mentioned, "Dear members of the school committee, I am writing to express my sincere thanks for the Becoming a Man program, currently running at the Healy School for boys in the 6th through 8th grade. My sons began the program as 6th graders this fall, and it has been transformative, reaching them in a way that other group programs and private therapies have not. Both boys now regularly discuss their goals for the future and their personal responsibilities. Their teachers report a transformation of their behavior within the classroom, and we have experienced the same at home. I close with this. I hope that the committee will continue to support this outstanding program, and thank you again. We appreciate your time. Back to you, Edith.
I just want to close by saying that I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge a few members. One, I want to start by acknowledging former Superintendent Mary Skipper, who was very instrumental in bringing BAM to Somerville. When we launched in Boston and then in Cambridge, Superintendent Skipper said, we need BAM, we need WOW. So I want to acknowledge her. I have to acknowledge Assistant Superintendent Jessica Boston, who has been an amazing champion for us. In this pamphlet, you will see also there is a picture of Mayor Ballantyne, who joined a BAM circle during the pandemic, right? At the Haley. So inside you'll see that picture. So I'm truly grateful for the mayor. And then Dr. Carmona, I had an opportunity to meet with you when you first, took the post and was able to meet with our leadership team, and just your passion for wanting to learn more about BAM and WOW and the commitment to supporting it. We don't do this work alone. We're not able to do it without champions like yourself and support. So I just want to say thank you to you all for your support, and look forward to continuing to provide, these opportunities for our young black and brown, young kings and queens in Somerville and beyond. So thank you.
Thank you so much for a wonderful presentation. I'm sure we'll have questions for you, so don't go just yet. I'm excited because I've been wanting to hear details about the program since we brought it to the district 3 or 4 years ago, however it was. So thank you for being here. I have Mr. Green. Then Dr. Ackman.
So I want to start off as a proud Healy parent to say that if we do have a bad narrative, it's undeserved. But I wanted to speak about what I've heard and seen as a Healy parent about the impact BAM has had at the Healy. It is I've spoken to young men who are in the program. Across the board, they love it. 2 principals now have sang your praises to me. It is rare that we get to do something in these seats that has had such a visual and visceral impact on a school community as BAM has had on the Healy. So I want to thank you on behalf of the students there.
Thank you. Gratitude.
Ms. Patone, Dr. Ackman, and then Mr. Bitone.
Chair. I too was really looking forward to this presentation. Former Superintendent Skipper was just so bullish about this work and so excited to bring you in, and the school committee was like, yup, please do this. And I also really appreciate you sharing the data and the specificity of it. It really reflects the investment that your involvement, your team, and the district's making. I'm curious about how recruitment enrollment happens, and how do we encourage participation. And I also had a question, and this might not be for you, this might be for the superintendent, in terms of we have other programming, we have Breakthrough, and how that susses itself out in terms of who gets identified, and maybe some students do both, I don't know.
So I'll start with just a collaborative approach. Like, we're intentional. One of our models is systemic engagement, leader engagement, and that means really being embedded in the fabric and in the culture of the school. For us, it's not about being an outside organization, but how do we embed ourselves in the school level grade meetings, things of that nature. What partners are in the building? How do we work along those partners to, again, you made reference to, we're all serving the same young people, and that's one of the things that really bother me a lot in this work is a lot of times we work in silos, organizations, adults, but what would it look like and the impact be like if we collaborated and worked together? So one of our things is collective collaboration plus collective effort equals collective impact. So we hold that across, all of our, wherever we go, schools, partnerships, and things of that nature. So that's our intentionality. I'll let Darius speak to what recruitment looks like. For me, this is a special moment, not only, having Darius up here, but Darius started out as one of our first youth specialists. So when I think about legacy, is how do we grow our staff? And Darius now, as he spoke, is a supervisor, so he can speak to that experience and what recruitment is like. So Darius.
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, recruitment is 50 to 55 scholars per staff. 55 for BAM, 50 for WOW. And recruitment will start in September, basically when the school comes back. Start in September, go to late October, so about a month and a half. During that recruitment process, we have a referral link where anybody in the building, whether you are a principal, whether you're a teacher, whether you're a janitor, doesn't matter if you're someone who is an adult in that building who's working with the youth, you can use that link to refer the scholars. Now, just because a scholar is referred does not mean that they're in the program. We have a consent and an assent process. So in addition to that, the scholar has to volunteer to be there. So even if their parent will say, hey, we want you in BAM or we want you in WOW, the scholar still has to assent to be there. And so even if we get referrals from teachers and if we get referrals from even principals and deans, it's still the scholar has to assent to be there. And we do, during that recruitment session, really recruitment month and a half, we're doing our darnest to establish strong relationships with these scholars. And if we get a referral link and the scholar doesn't want to be there, that doesn't mean that we will stop working with them. That just means that we can't officially service them, but we can't document them, put them in our Salesforce is what we use to do our documentation. So we can't provide them any services, but we'll still work with that youth to make sure that we engage them every day. And maybe it's not September, maybe October you want to come on. So that's what the recruitment process looks like then. What will happen is the curriculum piece, which will be administered after we do the assessments. So that's the next 6 or so months. And then by the time we get to May, June-ish, then we'll do our post-assessments and wrap up, and then we call it the termination group process. And then we get ready for summer. And also what I failed to mention too is that we do run programming during our breaks. So we were getting ready for career readiness during February break. We'll actually be at Somerville High School with our scholars from Healy, Winter Hill, and Somerville, doing career readiness, working on resumes, working on job opportunities. And then in addition to that, we also do the Summer Training Academy, and we also run programming then as well. Yes, I think, is there any more questions for that? Or?
Thank you. And then you had a separate question, which was how does this program connect and relate to some of the other programs happening?
Yeah, I think that was probably more to the superintendent in terms of placement and recruiting between the different, and I think we also have the calculus project, and I don't know what else, but it was always something I was very curious of how we were going to, like we have this embarrassment of riches, all this wonderful programming, and how do we support families and students making those types of choices.
Dr. Kamano, did you want to respond to that, or you want to?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Through the chair, I was referencing BAM, WOW, Breakthrough, the calculus project. How do we as a district help support families and students in terms of making the right kinds of choices, or can they do multiples? How does that all work out for students?
Yes, so we're currently doing an overall assessment of the impact of the different programs. Many of the ones that you mentioned are also live in the same space of the other service providers who support different buildings. And so right now I'm asking our Department of Social Emotional Learning to give us an idea of how all these pieces fit together. We have to have a tier system of support that is comprehensive, and so we are providing different services in different places, and these are significant tiers of intervention that actually can be systematically built in. And so I think that I'm very impressed with the impact report that we received. I think that we don't have one from the other departments like this one, so I'm really thrilled, and that's why I'm also excited to have them here today. But I don't know, Jess also, this is kind of lives in the kind of the curriculum department, so I don't know, Jess, if you have anything to contribute.
Sure, through the chair. First of all, thank you so much for this comprehensive presentation, ever inspiring. So thank you, and thank you for the work you do for our kids every day, our students every day, our scholars in the way you put it every day. So that said, I think the question is great, and there are overlap in the 3, for example, programs that you've listed, Breakthrough, the Calculus Project, and BAM and WOW. There are overlaps, but there are some distinctions between the programs that I think, so for example, one of the things that I think that that is really a pillar for me as I hear about BAM and WOW is the majority of the students that are in those programmings happen to qualify for or receive Tier 2 and Tier 3 programming. That is quite exceptional because that means that they are working very closely and obviously, especially through this impact report, having a huge impact on some of our students that, obviously require a lot of support in areas. All of that being said, whereas I think about Breakthrough, there's an application process for Breakthrough. There are criteria to meet, and it may be a little bit different. Often, though, Breakthrough does kind of focus in on students who may be first generation. So there could be overlap there, and I actually think that you could participate, knowing the schedule of Breakthrough, I think you could actually participate in both programs. But there could be, some distinct differences that would attract one student to one versus, however, obviously there's allow for overlap. In the same vein, the Calculus Project, and I think the Calculus Project and Breakthrough have a lot of similarities also, but there are limitations through Breakthrough. Breakthrough only takes 50 kids per grade per year. So that was a complex, not quite fully formed answer. I think in short, there's opportunity to participate in all, though Breakthrough in the Calculus Project, I would assume you'd have to make a choice, but there are some differences that I think would determine whether a student would prefer either one, and Breakthrough is an application process. I think that's where I'll stop here because I'm talking a bit in a circle, but I think there's opportunity for all to coexist.
It looks like you wanted to follow up on that.
Yeah,
Go back to Ms.
I'm
Michelle.
sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to follow up with the Tier 2 and Tier 3 piece. BAM really it's proven to work best when we get the Tier 2 scholars, but we're finding, especially after the pandemic, a lot of our scholars are starting to fall into that Tier 3. And so we do Tier 2, Tier 3, and also I wanted to mention that we are very inclusive. We are very, and I'll say it again, very, very proud that we serve as many Black and brown students that we do, but it is completely inclusive. It is not just that we take only the Black and brown students. We take everybody from every walk of life, every background, however you identify, you can come into our program. Just the way the numbers point out, proportionately, that's where we're at.
And you had a follow-up?
Yeah, it's just quick, and it doesn't have to be answered today. So this is a little deterred for redirection from this, but Breakthrough, this is our first graduating class of Breakthrough students this year. So, and I think the Calculus Project started around the same time, so I guess the request is I look forward to hearing sort of what kind of is the assessment. It sounds like you're doing more than just that assessment, but I'm really curious about what the outcomes were for that group of students. So I look forward to that. Thank you.
I had Dr. Ackman and then Mr. Vitone and then Dr. Phillips.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for your patience in our meeting. I am also a Healy parent. I'm a parent of a Black son. Part of the reason I chose Healy is because he is incredibly intelligent and has some social emotional challenges, and BAM was one of the reasons that I want him to go. He talks about joining. He knows older kids. I know there are other parents of Black and brown males who have chosen Healy for that reason, and so we're excited. Thank you. One of the things that I wanted to note is the U.S. Surgeon General, Dr. Vivek Murthy, has released a call to action on mental health within about the past year, and in hearing him speak publicly about it, he noted that there are a lot of challenges right now and not a lot of solutions. One of the very few successful solutions he noted by name were BAM and WOW. I remember hearing that and cheering. I knew, but the U.S. Surgeon General, that's a big deal. So, I look forward to seeing that in your lit at some point. I also wanted to note positively, I've seen the impact with the males I've seen at Healy. I've also started to notice more male caregivers of color at the Healy School than in the few years I've been there, and
I think that is also indirectly attributed to the work you do, and I love it. So I can't thank you enough.
I have Mr. Bitone and then Dr. Phillips.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Hearing the celebration of this work and the services that you're providing to our young scholars is, it's making me jealous. Where's the love for the west side of the city? So, yeah, well, you know, so there's something there. But no, I just want to pick up on what Ms. Patone had mentioned earlier about the data that you've provided. I had a chance to thumb through the presentation before this meeting, and I'm a scientist, so I really appreciate it. One thing that I wanted to dig into more, and I want to just highlight, and I'm sorry, I'm a little bit all over the place. Wanted to highlight one sentence that hit me like a ton of bricks. In the pre-test questionnaire, you stated 14% of scholars reported suicide ideation at least once in the previous 2 weeks at pre-test. That's 3 in every 20 kids. That's a crisis. And then you follow that up and say 64% of the scholars who had stated clinical range depression had lower depression following WOW participation. So just thank you. Thank you for intervening with these kids who really need help. What I'd like to know is, what is the degree of you know, how much are we helping these kids? I get the 64% of this, we're counting kids, right? So 64% of those kids, 2/3 of them, are reporting lower depression. I'd love to know how much low, you know, I don't know if you're looking at numbers on that scale. Are they marginally better? Are they dramatically better? And you don't have to answer this today. I'd love to know more if you have that to report, so thank you.
And I'd love to invite
Dr. Phillips.
Thanks, through Chair. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your excellent report. Thank you more for your excellent work. Your data is super compelling. Your reputation is as one of the bright spots in our out-of-school time supports for kids, and I'm interested to know from your perspective, what is it that you're doing? Like, what makes your program work so well?
What's your special sauce?
There it is. So the secret sauce for us is starting.
Oh, make sure to go to the mic just so people at home can hear you. Yep.
So the secret sauce, I'm always tell people that I love BAM and WOW for what it does for the young people, but from a selfish standpoint, I love what BAM and WOW does for the adults and the people who lead this program. And I'm going to get vulnerable right now and share a little bit about my story. I was raised in a single-parent home, oldest of 4 boys, lost my brother to gang violence. I grew up in the city of Boston. I'm a product of the Boston public school system. Had no father figure, not because he was dead or anything, just chose not to be a part of my life. When mother said she was pregnant, he said, that's not my child. So I grew up without a father. That led me to being involved in a lot of negativity that society has to offer, you know, a young man without the proper guidance. So I looked to the wrong male figures as role models. For years, I walked around with this pain, this anger. I was considered to be 2 places growing up that was either dead or in jail. But I had a mentor who came into my life and poured into me and saw something in me when I did. So fast forward to when I took over the band program in 2017. It was the first time that I had, Miguel talked about, or Darius talked about rites of passage, that I had to deal with all that trauma and pain in my life, because prior to that, I suppressed it. My wife used to say to me, I'm married, me and my wife have been together for 33 years. We have 3 beautiful children. Sean Jr. is 31. My middle son, Shandon, is 24, graduated from Niagara University, basketball scholarship, and my daughter's our youngest. She's 19, and I tell everyone she runs the house. She's at Howard University in her sophomore year. So for me, it was about changing that narrative. I knew I was going to be marrying my high school sweetheart when I graduated from college. I said that if I have kids, my kids would never grow up without a father like I did. But for years, I caused a lot of pain with my wife because I held on to a lot of that pain. I didn't show any emotions, and she would say, you need to see counseling or see someone. I said, I'm not crazy. That's what we heard from our young people all the time. That's what we hear in our black community. Like when it talks about therapy, we're not crazy. We don't need therapy. And that was the best thing that happened for me when I joined this organization in 2017. I went on a weekend where I did my work. I was able to go back to that 10-year-old boy and get the answers to I need to deal with that daddy wound of my father not being in my life. I was able to go back and deal with losing my brother to gang violence because I suppressed that. I never grieved. So for me, every man and woman that comes into this program has to go through that type of experience. So for us, when you say what the secret sauce is, it's hiring people who are a reflection of what we want our young people to be. For me, I don't play with this at the expense of young people. I'm never going to put an adult in front of our young person who's not a reflection of what I want them to be. When we talk about accountability, no one is above being held accountable. That's even myself as executive director. And that's just the secret sauce. So it's really about hiring the men and women who are just a reflection of what we want to be, who are going to show up as their authentic self, who are going to do their work. So that is the secret sauce to your question. And what really separates this program from other programs is that we blend 3 different modalities: the rites of passage, a dynamic approach to youth engagement, and then a clinical piece, which is really just, it's a game changer, and I'll end it there.
Ms. Patel? Thank you, through you, Chair, and I apologize. I know it's getting late for everyone, so I'll just be quick. I was curious when you discussed the criteria and the population of students in BAM versus WOW, and you mentioned very specifically that our WOW students, it's a more of a clinical identity, or not identity, but situation. Can you speak to that a little bit, and is that somehow related to the fact that we start WOW in high school and not when the kids are younger? And I also, at some point from the superintendent, look forward to hearing about if there is an opportunity to expand this program where it makes sense.
Yep. So WOW starts same as BAM, 7 through 12. Actually, we see the importance of working upstream. So we now start at the 6th grade level as well. But what separates BAM WOW, the difference is, as Darius spoke about, is the 2 different assessments. You know, the SEL for BAM and the HSA, and then really the assessments for WOW is different. Also, every WOW counselor is master level, so has to have a master's in clinical or licensure in that, whereas BAM, we look for master level counselors as well, but if they don't, the minimum is a bachelor's in years of experience in the social work field. So that's what really kind of separates the difference between BAM and WOW is.
Through the chair, I just was curious why. Why is it different? Do our young women have a very different need profile than our young men? I'm trying to understand.
Yep. So great question. I think when you look at, again, across the board, I think young men also suffer from, when you think about depression and anxiety, is just, again, I told my shirt, like we didn't describe, didn't name it, but for WOW, it's really, when we think about the assessments, again, that comes up for our young queen. It goes back to the need to address a lot of the challenges that they're having around bullying, around depression, around anxiety. Like, those are the things when we look at the WOW program that really comes up for us. I guess I hope I feel like I'm not getting to your point in terms of
the students are in different places.
The students are in different places. Darius wants to add. I'll let Darius add.
Yeah. Yeah, the scholars definitely are in different places where we see our young men and where we see the young women at. But also, just for context, BAM started in 2001, and that is a different program than WOW. It's not the same curriculum, it's not the same program. WOW started in 2012. BAM got 3 randomized study tests by the Chicago Crime Lab in 2008, and then it got the backing from that, and then Youth Guidance came in, which is our housing organization, and took in BAM. And then while we were doing it with BAM, many of the schools were saying, hey, we need something for our young women, and then WOW was created in 2012. So WOW was created a decade later, and so I think that's also part of the difference in what we're seeing and what we're assessing. But that's a great point, and we could definitely learn more about that.
Dr. Nelson-Davis?
Thank you, through the chair. I just wanted to add one comment about the secret sauce. And I know that it's late, but I just want to add this. When BAM first came into Somerville Public Schools, and I was in the role of Director for Equity, there was a meeting in person, and then the schools closed for COVID. And we did a launch with the Somerville High staff on Zoom, and we did an opening circle. And I think this is part of the secret sauce that the organizations do. And we invited all of the assistant principals and deans and admin to be on this call to learn about this new program that we were going to have. And people kind of showed up as we do on Zoom, and just ready, and didn't expect that we were all going to have to participate in the way that the students do. And when I tell you, it was powerful in a way that people couldn't usually connect over Zoom. There were multiple people in tears, chills. I mean, the feeling over the screen was, you can feel the energy and how powerful of a program it is. And by the end of that call, every single person on that call was like, this is important. How do we make sure this happens in our schools? And thank you for being here. What do we need to do to make sure that this program is successful? And all really I did was set up the Zoom link. I just kind of set up the link and then turned it over. So I just want to, when you ask the question, Dr. Phillips, about a secret sauce, it's really like the forcing of all of the adults to be a part of this, and it was just like the opening circle. So it was, you can only imagine how special a community can be from just that quick, 30-minute session that we had with all the admin. So I just wanted to add that because I think anybody who's participated in those would be able to speak to, convinced this is an amazing program and how do we support it for our kids. So I just wanted to, I know it's late, but I had the opportunity, so I had to share that.
And I'll be super brief, I'm so sorry. Yes, we actually just did a PD with the Healy staff. January 3rd, where we sat in circles and we did an experience with them. And that experience, getting to the secret sauce, it's transformative. We say our program is a holistic education program. And I didn't really understand what that meant until I came here. I always hear these words, transformative learning, holistic education, holistic teaching. And this is actually, we meet our scholars where they're at. We take a look at the whole scholar to see what is going on and checking in with them to create this transformative experience. And it's really interesting because transformative education is really referred to for adults. And it's not looked at like scholars can have experiential education, but this is really a transformative experience that we're doing with our young folks. So yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Ms. Parrish?
I just want to say thank you. It's rare that we get to see you in person, so thank you for being here tonight. Thank you for everything you give our district and our kids and our community as a result.
And I think on that note, we will let you go for this evening. Thank you so much. Is there more to your district report?
Yes, just one more piece around, I just will be remiss if I mention that this is Black History Month, and I wanted just to highlight the fact that every school is doing something related to that since January. Every school has a different flavor, different celebration. And I also think that this is also an important opportunity for us to acknowledge some of the structural challenges that we have had in the system itself that basically has created the conditions for some students to have these academic gaps. And so what we just saw today is one of those ways to really disrupt those systems that actually are impacting how our students and how the gaps academically as well as emotionally are built. We have a commitment, we have a collective commitment to make sure that we look at the policies that we have to address the gaps. And also, this is for me is a reminder that we're working on different things that sometimes have not been fully clear, like incorporating the experiences of all our students in the curriculum, the commitment to staff diversification, the commitment to make sure that in SPS we see every single student, irrespective of the race and background, and that we are able to conceive them as high achievers in our system. And so sometimes this dichotomy of diversity and low academics is one that needs to be totally negated, because sometimes that is something that I hear. So we need to reverse that trend. We have a wonderful equity statement, and I think that this is a testament of this community and the commitment around reversing the trends of outcomes. So I just wanted to invite everyone to keep on pushing and to make sure that we keep on building the scaffolds for our students so they all have access to great opportunity academically as well as emotionally. And so that's the context in which we are celebrating Black History Month.
That concludes your district
That is the district report, yeah.
Okay, then we have one report of the subcommittee. I will entertain a motion.
I move to accept the report of this, of the Rules Management Subcommittee.
Second.
I have a motion by Ms. Parrish, seconded by Mr. Bitone. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? All opposed? Motion carries. That brings us to unfinished business, the MSBA update. Dr. Kamara?
So the update, I just wanted to let you know and remind everyone that we are still we haven't started the eligibility period. It starts on March 4th, but we are full force working with our teams and also the city, the mayor's office to establish a couple of things that need to be in place. The next piece that is due soon is something called an educational plan questionnaire. We were waiting for that to come. It just arrived this morning, so the chair and I will be looking at that. And probably at some point you will be part of that conversation of completing that questionnaire for the district. We also will be meeting this week with the mayor to talk about our school building committee. I know that there has been great interest from families as to what is the makeup of that committee, how do we sign up for that, what is the process. So that is something that we will be sharing and discussing with the mayor's office this week. As you know, the mayor is the one person who appoints the members of the committee and also is based on the MSBA approval. And there are some minimum requirements for that, but this, again, the city can select, or the mayor can select more members. The breakdown for the high school was around 20 members, and so, and there were redundancies in terms of who were the members that were added to that system. So as soon as we have more information around that, we will be sharing that with you. There's also a lot of interest. Actually, I'm switching to the Brown, and yeah, so let me just give you a little bit of an update on the meetings with the Brown and Winter Hill listening sessions.
Pause for a moment for questions on what we've covered so far, and then we'll continue.
Through the chair, it's actually a comment. I just wanted to reference that the mayor gave us a memo specifically about K-8, and she or her team specifically says there's going to be a call for building committee member applications that will be announced in March. So I think it's important that we kind of alluded to that, at least in some of the meetings, that I assumed there were going to be an application process, but specifically from the mayor's office that she has said there will be one, and it'll be announced in March.
And I also just want to mention that the mayor is homesick. She was going to be here tonight, but she's been sick. With that,
Yes, so I just wanted to give an update of the listening sessions that we had with the Brown and Winter Hill community. And so I'm really excited that we had this opportunity to be able to engage in dialogue about some of the concerns and the needs of the different communities that we have. Again, one of the questions that came up was around the MSBA process. There was also a question about accelerating the process. The understanding that we have is MSBA basically said, yes, you can start earlier, but it's very unlikely that we will be processing that information. That is their language, that they stagger these processes so they have enough time to manage every building at a certain, in a pace that makes sense for them. There are some things that came out of the conversations with the families. There was the acknowledgement that both the schools are facing challenges, but Winter Hills are most present. There's the preference to retain both the school communities on their current sites, and also the understanding that when and how the community members can be part of the MSBA process. Both sessions were very productive and generated a lot of great conversation. I'm really excited and grateful that we had this opportunity to communicate with families.
pause for questions, comments. Ms. Patel?
Through you, Chair Krepchen, I just wanted to thank the superintendent and the staff who came out and hosted those meetings. I think that they were very much appreciated. As a school committee member, I really appreciated hearing directly from the community, so thanks to the community for coming out for that. So.
And did you want to touch at all on the K-8 memo that we received from the city?
Yes and no. It is a very, I think that if you look to the memo, there's nothing different from the conversation we have had. I think the comment that you made, Ms. Piton, about the process and reaching out to the community, that's one thing that I highlighted as being unique. But I think that that was the highlight that I have, is that there will be a feedback process that will be available coming soon, so we will be waiting for that information. And the next steps also around the building committee membership application. As you said, it will be in March, so I thought that was something that we definitely would like to be part of that process.
Mr. John?
Through you, Chair Krepchen, to the superintendent. I know that notes were captured from both the Winter Hill and the Brown meetings, so I'm just curious how they'll be published.
Yes, Amara reminded me to remind you that those notes will be coming, so I think we finished one of them, but we wanted to send them together.
Will they be on the master planning website? Will they be on the district website? Like, you guys can figure it out and let us know later, which is fine.
That is a good question. I have to check with Jackie and Amara on that.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, that concludes. Yes, Mr. Green?
Only because I've heard this from several. Cause I know that the look for a bus, the combination of a bus solution next year, and that it's complicated. But do we have at least a timeline for when we'll be able to say either we were able to find something or no, or it's not going to happen for busing busing at Edgerly next year?
Busing, got it.
Thank you. So when I talk to, so the idea is yes. However, when I talk to Mrs. Goslin, Principal Goslin. She told me that the situation we had was untenable because it was basically the second round of buses was late, was delaying kids, and was also tying up personnel to deal with that. I asked our CFO to send a bid for a new round of buses because you'll have to basically double the fleet, double the cost. We made a commitment to that in terms of cost, that we're sharing that with the mayor and our office, but unfortunately the company that was going to provide that service has said they will not be able to commit another 3 set of buses. So we're back again to square one, and I asked, that is a bid that we sent out across the board. I talked to other superintendents, and I'm hearing that they're having similar challenges. I don't know, I mean, I think we should think about buying a bus. I don't know the complications that brings, but
That was my next question.
I asked Mr. Fran Gorski that we should be exploring a question of a bus, or a few buses, so.
And just for the committee's reminder committee, MASC did pass a resolution asking the state auditor to audit bus companies and school transportation contracts. Because of course it's completely a coincidence that every district only gets one bid for bus systems.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, that brings us to a policy coming for a second reading. Ms. Parrish, do you want to give us the quick background?
Just briefly, to remind folks why this is before you, I think it's pretty clear if you look at the draft that was in the folder, but essentially a staff member suggested that we add English language proficiency and immigration status to the list of protected categories in that policy. And so rules said, let's do it, and now it's before this body.
And it's technically our second reading, correct?
This is our second reading. There were a couple of other very minor changes, like I got rid of the word other, and I think I removed a space because there were too many spaces, or like a period or something, but other than that.
Great, I will entertain a motion.
Move to approve.
I have a motion by Mr. Green, seconded by Dr. Ackman. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. That brings us to a diploma request. I will entertain a motion.
I move to approve the diploma requests for Sulmi Garo Duplicea and Ana Angelica Barrera Kalashij, I will say. That is my hope.
Second. I have a motion by Dr. Ackman, seconded by Dr. Phillips. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Congratulations to our two new graduates. We have acceptance of grant funds. I will entertain a motion.
I move to accept federal entitlement and continuation grants and all state continuation grants awarded to the Somerville Public Schools listed below from the state, supporting students' social, emotional learning, behavioral, mental health, and wellness through multi-tiered systems of support for $86,200. From private companies, Wellington, $18,000 to support participants in the Pathways Project through HBCC model. Parent Child Plus, $20,000 to help support Parent Child Plus services for 5 families. And Somerville Education Foundation, $5,767.88 for youth robotics mentors.
Second.
I have a motion by Dr. Ackman, seconded by Ms. Patone. Ms. Patone has a question?
Through you, Chair Krepchen. I just had a question, just briefly, something to be shared by specifically the Wellington and the Parent Child Plus grants. What are they? Or if you don't have that information, if you can share that in a future meeting.
Share it next time. Okay, we'll get back to you. Any other questions? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. That brings us to donations.
I move to accept with gratitude a monetary donation from Fidelity Charitable in the amount of $2,000 to CTE seniors.
Second.
I have a motion by Dr. Ackman, seconded by Ms. Patone. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? All opposed? Motion carries. That brings us to items from committee members. I have a quick one, which is just that, and then Mr. Bitone. Mr. Bitone requested information about changes to AP classes at the high school. So that was a memo from Dr. Boston Davis that was emailed to all of you guys today. Read it. If you have specific questions, we can have it on the agenda at a future meeting and have somebody from the high school here to talk about it. But I hesitated to do that without somebody here from the high school to talk about it, so let me know. Mr. Green?
As a matter of transparency, can we make sure that gets put in a future public package so that, since it is now a public document, so that people can access it?
Sure. Ms. Patone.
Through you, Chair Krupchen, I've asked in the past about the field at the high school, so I continue to get questions from constituents about why it's not being used. I don't know if it should be on a future regular agenda or it should be on a future finance and facilities. So I'd love to hear about that, and I'd also like to hear the updates about the Winter Hill bathrooms at some point.
Okay.
Just on that, through you, there's an item to discuss the field in the school building committee, and the issue, we were updated at our last city council meeting. It has to do with a building code issue with the railing around the field. I think some members of the public are aware of this, but I'm not currently aware kind of exactly when and how that's going to be fixed. So.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Malza.
Through you, in terms of Ms. Patone, in terms of the bathroom, we want to make sure that our young scholar who spoke tonight can hear this. I had a conversation with DPW. That particular bathroom, there was so much damage done to it, they have to actually rip up the entire floor and redo the bathroom. That will take place over February break. Principal Goslin had sent an email to me in terms of that particular bathroom in proximity to the other bathrooms on the other two floors that I shared with Dr. Carmona and Chair Krupchen. So she can certainly share that with you, but that particular bathroom is getting redone, fully redone over February break, because there was some significant damage done to it. So it's not just as easy as opening that bathroom up, unclogging a toilet. There was damage done to the floor. So it's more cumbersome than we thought.
Thank you.
And then Dr. Carmona wants us to mention briefly the book that you guys have all received. Dr. Carmona?
Yes, so it's a great book. Awesome author, Michael Fullan. He's Canadian. He claims that he's probably one of the he actually was a superintendent at some point in a section in Canada where they were able to bring change at the scale of the district. Usually, if you have a change, it's at the school level or a city level, but at a district level, it's not easy to make it happen. Great author, easy to read. It is the idea that both the school committee or the boards, in collaboration and creating synergy with the superintendency, we can create some lasting change in the community. I would love to read it with you, do some kind of book study or whatever works, but it is a very inspiring book in my mind. So hopefully we can find a way to collaborate to do some book study or book club or whatever.
All right. If there are no other items from board members, we are adjourned. Have a good night. Oh, Dr. Phillips.
We have a condolence.
Oh, thank you.
Together we remember John Jack Lemire, father of Sharon Lemire, 7th and 8th grade teacher at the Albert F. Argenziano School.
And now with that, we are adjourned. Have a good night, everyone.